Hey everybody, I'm going to be teaching you a lesson today, and the objective of this lesson will be students being able to pick out figurative language throughout a story and see how it enhances the text, and then they can carry that over into their everyday lives by using figurative language in their own writing and just picking up and noting figurative language that they see elsewhere. So to model this, I have a few visuals that I'm going to go over first before I go over the activity, which is a read aloud. So the first thing is the series. So the students love the Creepy series. I have Creepy Carrots here that I will be using. There also is Creepy Crayon and Creepy Underwear. The students love this series. They're always very motivated and very engaged. So I tend to always work this way in no matter what I'm teaching. So to get started, before I introduce that text even to the students, I also have a visual that I made, but I will be hiding from the students. This is my visual with our figurative language and then the text story or the text name there. So I'll have that covered, and I will use my anticipatory set, which is kind of how you're introducing what you're learning to the kids. I'll have a brown paper bag and I'll shake it, and then I'll have students guess and use describing words to what they're hearing, which essentially is onomatopoeia. So I'll have students turn and talk with one another so they get that collaboration piece, and then they'll be guessing. They could hear like crack, boom, pang, which is onomatopoeia. And I'll have some students guess, and I'll explain to them how they actually use figurative language without even noting. And then I'll pull the carrot out of the bag, and I'll ask them, what is this creepy carrot doing in my bag? And then I'll introduce the text. They usually get very excited because they know it's coming. I'll introduce the poster, and then I will also put up all of our vocab on the board. So this is a visual that I printed out. This is what I would have for the students. I have the 4 types of figurative language and then 4 vocab words that students might be seeing within the text they might be a little confused about. I also have images, so students that are ELL or students that have a little bit struggle with reading have those images to go along with our terms so that they know what's going on and they're not confused. I would explain each of these. I would also explain the images, same thing with the vocab words, and then I would switch to another slide that has just the figurative language and then the definitions written out as well that students need to, if they need to go back, they're right there for them and they don't have to interrupt. So for the read aloud, I will model a few pages. So parents at home, it is very important to read to your children. If they're not reading independently, this is one way they could get reading, which is very valuable in their education. So before even reading, I have pages marked off where I want students to pick up on certain figurative language that we'll talk about. So this is an example of a few pages that I would read, and you'll notice in my tone and in my voice how different it will get. Creepy carrots. Jasper Rabbit had a passion for carrots, and the carrots that grew in Krakenhopper Field were the best. Fat, crisp, and free for the taking. He pulled some for a morning snack on the way to school. He yanked out a few on his way to Little League practice. He ripped them from the ground on his way home at night. Jasper couldn't get enough carrots. Now, friends, I've noticed a lot of different settings on these 2 pages. If I'm seeing something, what figurative language could that be applying to? And then when I ask this, I will have students talk with one another, anyone around them, and as a teacher, I will keep an eye out to see if someone isn't speaking to someone, and if I could maybe join groups and combine them so that everyone is included. And I will also hint back to the figurative language on the board, this model, and then I'll explain to students that that was an example of imagery, just so everyone is on the right track. So I'll model a few more pages. So he couldn't get enough carrots until they started following him. Now I did also mark this page as well. I'll have students turn and talk again, and then I'll have them allude to the fact that carrots can't really follow Jasper the Rabbit. So that is a few examples of how I would read aloud to students. So parents at home, while you're reading to your children, it is so important that they are looking at the images. You don't want to be reading and have them just look at the cover. That way they're not motivated and not engaged. So I would keep reading throughout the story. And this is something that I always like to do when I'm finishing a story. So this is the last sentence. Jasper Rabbit would never get into that carrot patch ever again. The end. So I always like to end a little bit dramatically by saying the end because students get super excited. They ask for you to read more. But then how I reel them in is I tell my students that we're playing a game. So for an example, a game that I created is I wrote down a list of 10 events that relate to the story. So for example, the carrot started following Jasper. And I will have little paper strips of all the events that I came up with, and it's the student's responsibility to sort those strips into the correct category. So for example, the one that I just read, the carrot started following Jasper, that would be personification, because carrots can't really follow someone, right? Personification is giving human traits to something that's non-human. So students could use the visual that I still have up on the board. I also print out the visuals to give to them, and unless the student has a visual impairment and they need something closer, to make sure every student is included and engaged. So then as the students are working together in groups, I did forget to mention that collaboration is a very important piece for me in my classroom because I want students to build that social emotional learning and working together. So students will sort these together. The teacher, I will be walking around the room to ensure everyone's working and then reward students and praise them if they're correct. And I will also be hinting at students to see if they're correct because in the end, I want every student to get 100% on this. So at home, when you're doing a read aloud, I always try to be engaged and use a very enthusiastic tone because if you're reading monotone, your child probably is not paying attention. So that is one way I will do that. And then to carry anything into the real world, have students make those connections. So that is what I tend to do during my lessons, and incorporate your assessment into a game because the students won't even realize that they're learning and they're still motivated and engaged. So good luck at home.